So we're going to talk about creating a life story book. Um, and this is something that's become very, very important to me. For those of you who are not aware, I worked for 26 years in child welfare, and one of the jobs that we had was creating a life story for the kids in our care. And so really, that took a lot of preparation time. I found it incredibly rewarding. A lot of preparation time because we would go through files and pull out things like, birth information, where the child was born. We'll talk about all of this stuff. We would pull out court documents. We would just kind of get a social history. And it became so critical to the kids because a lot of the kids didn't really understand why it was that problems had happened in their family. And often because for their safety, they may have had to have been removed. They didn't understand that they weren't the problem. And so just sort of carrying on that whole need for people to understand, I've started doing, well, I've been doing them for quite a while, but just really concentrating a lot more in the last few months on creating storybooks, life storybooks for family. So I've done a couple where I've had cousins that have passed away quite young. And by young, I mean as adults, so not children, but still, before their parents, which I don't think any parent should ever have to live through. And so I have done storybooks for the parents and the remaining family so that they have that sort of memory book that they can go to when they're feeling grief and, remember some of the happier times that they shared with their child. And probably the most recent ones that I did, my uncle passed away, I think it's about 3 years ago now. And my aunt, his wife, was she like I was. She took a great deal of photographs, and so for his children, her children, their children, I put a life book together, a life story book together, and we'll look at that in a little bit. And the kids, it was the greatest gift that they had received because it really was just the story of their dad and then of course their dad and their mom together. And it was fun for me because they are younger than me, not significantly, but young enough. And I was able to remember, I was old enough to understand some of the things that they may have a glimpse of a memory of, but they didn't really comprehend it. And so being able to put those sorts of stories together for them was really a lot of fun as well. And then in late August, I had the eldest of my aunts passed away, and I did the same thing. My cousin was good enough to share 1,000 photographs with me that I scanned and did a book for her. And because of all the new photos that were in there, I also did one on my mom, so which is the most recent. I'm working on one now with my grandmother. So certainly I have done the family history book, that has really been more of a genealogy. A lot of the story is very, very important to me. And so it includes a lot of the story as well as photographs, and it includes documents and that sort of thing. But that was more general, just so the family understood sort of where they belonged in, the grand scheme of our family. These are more personal to an individual. So I tend to start chronologically. You'll find your own way of doing this, but I really do. It's easier for me if I can sort of organize my thoughts chronologically when I'm putting stuff together. And I have been known to sort of, put stuff together. I have in my head what I want, and I may put photographs in, or I may put some of the text and then go back and kind of rejig it a little bit, and that's fine too. It will take you a little bit of time, but it is incredibly rewarding to do. And I think the other thing is you need to know who your audience is, right? So when I was doing life stories for children, my audience was them. And so the way that I spoke to them or wrote really was geared in much more simplistic language than perhaps if I was doing for an adult. So I start with documenting the birth. I look at who the parents were. I mentioned that, their date of birth, their place of birth, any siblings that they have. And I try to include some either a certificate, a newspaper announcement, pictures, or any ephemera And this was actually from the aunt that I did the book on recently. My cousin sent this through, and it was all the stuff that my aunt had saved for her son, the oldest of the children. And she's put a little note card there in with the things that she had saved for Ian, explaining what they were. So he's got at the very top of that, you can see his badge from the BOAC Junior Jet Club. I don't have the badge anymore, but I do have my passbook that the captains would sign. Those things that look like dumbbells are actually baby bells for his shoes, his bracelet from the hospital, and then her card writing out what each thing was. Talk about their early life. So my aunt had come to Canada, so basically had said that she was the eldest of my grandmother and grandfather, even though my grandfather had older children. I talked about her relationship with them. And that, what brought her to Canada. She was really the first to come. She started the chain migration in our family. And so this is, and I love this picture. This is them building their first house. I mean, it was their only house, to be honest. I mean, she lived in it for, gosh, must have been 70 years. Talked about where they live, where they work. If family has moved from place to place, I mentioned that. And one of the things that was kind of interesting in this situation was because she was the first, she was the safe space where everybody arrived. So everybody who came subsequent to her spent time with her until they got on their feet. So it really became home for everybody at various points in their journey to becoming, to living in Canada. I include any memories of stories from their childhood or their teen years. This is actually a photograph of me just before my 6th birthday. My father and I were in a head-on collision with a drunk driver and both very nearly killed. At that time, they didn't have seat belts. I was in the front seat and went under the dashboard, fractured my leg, actually where it goes into the ball joint of the hip joint. So I was in hospital in traction for 6 weeks, 6 or 7 weeks. I had some internal bleeding. And so I, just it's important, I think, to be able to tell those sorts of stories as well. And that was really my life for 6 weeks, was just literally what you can see there. It was, the stuffed dog and the doll. Talk about relationships, who they were closest to among their siblings. I talk about whether they were close to any parents or grandparents or aunts or uncles. Talk about where they met their spouse, any info on the spouse. So what I've done is for each person, my uncle and my aunt, my mom, have talked about when and where they met their spouse, if I know that. And then also, that, for instance, this is my aunt and uncle. So he was the son of, and filled that in as well. My aunt's story in terms of coming, her immigration story in terms of coming to Canada was that she came to support her sister-in-law. She was really quite overwhelmed at being here on her own with 2 very young children. Her husband was away at work. She was in a foreign country, knew nothing, knew nobody. And so my aunt came over to support her in that. And really, when she got here, never left, never had the inkling to go back. And then in my mom's case, I talked about how my mom and dad met and that he was the youngest son of the family and what he did for a living and where he was born. And again, with my uncle, when I did it, I talked about my aunt, how they met and where they got married as well. And I include as many photographs as I can, because really for a lot of people, photos are it, right? They're the things that evoke the emotion and trigger the memories. But I really think it's important to have the story to go along with the photographs. So I talk about any work or any hobbies that the person had. You can see on the left there is my mom, who was a nurse. And on the right is my youngest aunt. I call that picture Judo Jane. She took judo, and also, I think she has a black belt. That was in her earlier life. if they spent any time, involved with their church organization, if they were, a scout mom, soccer mom, anything like that, I make sure that I have that in there so that, you get a real rich sense of who this person was, and it's not just dates and places. List any children that they have, and you can go as in depth with this as you want. You can list the children, and then if you want to mention the children's careers, the children's spouses, any grandchildren. Really, that's entirely up to you. So in some cases, I've just kind of given it a passing glance for the aunt and uncle who lost their children. So that's an aunt and uncle who actually are siblings to each other, lost their children as young adults. I spent time talking about the other children, but really, really dedicated a chunk of pages to the child that they had lost. Lots and lots of photographs in there, and then just bits about them as well, because I wanted it to be a memory book about that child. And I do my best to interview older relatives while they're still around. That has, again, just been an incredibly rewarding experience for me, as it would be for any family historian, anybody who's the keeper of the family memories. And again, photographs are incredible in terms of evoking emotion and triggering memories. So this actually, this is in Scotland when I was visiting my uncle and my aunt. And on the left, I'm actually holding my laptop. I had gone to see the eldest aunt in Scotland, so it's not the same one that I did the life story book on. This was my Aunt Jean. She was the oldest of my, so she was older than my aunt from my grandma and grandpa. My grandfather had been married before, so she was the youngest of that first family. And she had some photographs that I had never seen before. And I traveled everywhere with my FootPal scanner, and she was gracious enough to allow me to scan those photographs, mostly because I could hand the originals back. People are really quite happy to allow me to do that. And so my uncle, in those days when you took photographs, you didn't have, for those of us who remember putting film in a camera, you didn't get 5 sets made or duplicate sets made or whatever. You got one, and sometimes only one photo for the older photographs. And and now you've got photos that you can post, and thousands of people can see them, but it didn't happen that way then. And so my uncle and my aunt had not seen photos. This is of my grandfather, actually, so it's my uncle's dad. And you can see that my aunt is quite taken with the photograph of her father-in-law. It's the first time she's seen it. And then on the other side, on the right-hand side there, one of the photographs, I can't even recall now which one it was, but my uncle, it triggered a memory in him. And so he started telling me the story associated with the photograph and that kind of slice in time and place. And that was incredibly fascinating as well. So questions to ask when you're talking to older relatives. You want to know where they went to school, what they thought of school, any favorite subjects, any least favorite subjects. Where did they work after school? How old were they? I mean, in the cases of my parents and my aunts and my uncles, some of them were, 14, 15 years old. They were done school and off to work. Where did they meet their spouse? When did they get married? Who attended the wedding? Where was their first home together? How long did they live there? What was it like to become a parent? Did you have any special holiday traditions, either that they created together as a family or that they had carried on from their families of origin, or that they've passed down to their children and grandchildren? One thing that was ours, for instance, was at Christmas wearing the hats, having the Christmas crackers and wearing the hats, and that's it's not Christmas without those. We always make sure that that's a part of it. what would you like your children, grandchildren, great grandchildren to know about life? So not their life specifically, but life generally. Sort of what legacy. If you could teach them just one thing or two things, what would that be? What do you think that's important for them to know going forward? And that has been fascinating answers that I get from that. I did a life storybook for a friend of mine, and her actually did it for her uncle's 80th birthday, I think. And her mom was coming up for 80. She was a couple of years younger. And just hearing their response to that was just really, really incredible. And often it's very philosophical. Sometimes it's just be happy, but sometimes, it talks about, how the world can be an unsafe place, and how know that you have people that you can reach out, family first sort of thing. It's important to document your own story as a life storybook. This is something that I have to say I don't do as well on as I do putting other people's stories together, but it is a mission of mine to make sure that that is done. And when you're writing your own story, or even if you're doing a storybook on somebody else, talk about the major events that took place either during your lifetime or theirs. Talk about assassinations of presidents, impeachments of presidents, man going on the moon. I mean, I remember when everybody remembers where they were when JFK was murdered. I remember Man on the Moon. We went to my aunt's house. She had a color TV, and we all sat around and watched in color Neil Armstrong landing on the moon. Various civil rights movements that have taken place, any wars that you've lived through. Certainly for my family, it was the Second World War. Things like 9/11. It's another thing. It happens and you remember exactly where you were. 2020, the year from pandemic hell, and everything else that went along with that. It wasn't just the pandemic. I mean, the pandemic made everything else heightened, I think, but oh my gosh, there was so much that happened last year. And, I think all of us kind of hoped that on New Year's Eve, it was going to turn a leaf and we were all going to start fresh. But so far, January has been sort of an extended 2020. And, I think about my grandmother. She was 92 years old when she died. And in her lifetime, she went from horse and buggy to man on the moon. She went from hand washing your clothing in a big tin basin, similar to, what you would do canning in or have a bath in, to washers and dryers. It's incredible the amount of things that took place, the changes that took place in her lifetime. And so it was really important for me to capture that sort of thing as I'm doing her book. And how easily she adapted to it. How have these things changed the way in which we live? Or have they? You think certainly the presidents have a lot more security around them. Man on the moon. I mean, it's we're now living on the moon for 6 months at a time. And you think about. I remember when the beginning of the pandemic, and my daughter saying to me, "Well, this is the first for Christopher and I, but you lived through this in SARS." And I thought about that, and I thought, no, we really didn't. So I did some research and realized that I think there were 8,000 cases worldwide of SARS. I said, sure, really the only lasting impact of that was that hand sanitizing stations became more prominent and prevalent. You think about 9/11 and airport security, and we just take that for granted now. We just know that that's something that, for those of us who remember 9/11, we realize that that's why the airline security stuff is in there. Kids today probably wouldn't know that it was from 9/11, and they just carry on because that's a part of how their life has always been. You talk about TV, and we can remember when we were the remote, and now you just sit there and push a button. So just little things like that you don't really recognize because you take them for granted on a day-to-day basis. But it's important just to be able to say that it wasn't always like that, and this is what we used to do. How have those events shaped you as a person? Are you more anxious? Are you more cautious? Are there certain things that you won't do, certain places you won't go because of any of the life events that you lived through? What did you fear? And I think, any of the really major events like the assassination or civil rights or wars or, the terrorist attacks, um, there is fear, absolutely. And so your mind automatically goes there. And then for 2020, I think everybody just worried that none of us were going to survive. And what should the legacy of those events be? There are some who believe that everything happens for a reason. Well, what do you think the reason was? What did it come to teach us? And I was talking with my aunt in Scotland probably about a week and a half ago, and we were saying, when 2020 hit, in the beginning, it was like Mother Nature was coming back to life, right? There were fish in the canals in Venice, and there was less air pollution, and it was just it was incredible, really, to see Mother Earth sort of healing herself until sort of the lockdown let up a little bit. In terms of the story of you, share your childhood, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Where did you go to school? Where did you go to work? How old were you when you went to work? Where did you meet your spouse? What was it like to become a parent or a grandparent? What were the biggest struggles, the biggest changes, the biggest heartaches, the greatest joy of your life? What are the memories from generations before you? And this, I was so incredibly blessed, really, with my aunt that passed away in September. I had a good year and a half um, to really go every week and just talk about her recollections of her siblings, her parents, and her grandparents. And she was so funny because she would say, "I hope you're writing this down." But I had taken in actually a family book, the family history book that I did, and so it's her parents and her father was the father of 22 children. His first wife died in childbirth, and then he married my grandmother, and who really was the grandmother for everybody because Sarah's children were quite young when she passed away. Um, and it was fascinating to me because she would um, come to a picture and she would say, "Oh, do you know about?" And then she would tell me about this person in great detail that I had never really known before. I'm sure that I had been told it, but I just didn't pay attention, probably because I wasn't interested at the time. But where this person worked and what their relationship with their spouse was like, and what their relationship with their child was like, and what their hobbies were, and what they did together. My aunt and whatever other person she was talking about. She would talk about her grandmother, which was my great grandmother. She was what we call a handy woman, and so she was the person in the village that went to every birth until the doctor arrived. Granny Mac was out there, and she was. So anytime there was a baby being born in the village, our family knew about it because my great granny was off to attend to the birth and to assist the mom and support the mom through that until the doctor arrived. And then the grandparent on the other side of the family really was quite nasty. And hearing firsthand why she was considered nasty and some of the things that she had said and done, and the impact that had on some of the older children. So really, as I say, photographs are incredible, and I was really very lucky to be able to get some of that information prior to that generation being gone. And I only have maybe out of the 22, I think there's maybe 7 or 8 left. And so again, still trying to get their perspective on it because my aunt's is only one side. Certainly, she was closer to the children from the first family, the older children. But it's fun for me to hear, the younger ones talk about some of the mischief they got into. It was incredible. Last week, I had one of my aunts is in a memory care facility, and I took my laptop and we did a Zoom visit with 2 of her sisters in Scotland. And honestly, they laughed for a solid hour. And some of the shenanigans that they got up to when they were younger is what they were talking about. They were killing themselves laughing. And it's the sort of thing that, my brother and I might talk about, might have talked about when my parents were elderly, and they didn't by that time they can't ground us and they don't really have any say over us, and we would just be killing ourselves laughing. And that's exactly what the visit was like, and it was just so warm and rich for me to be able to relive those memories with them. But it also gave me insight into, these people weren't as perfect as I always thought they were, being my aunts and uncles. They got up to some pretty interesting stuff. And then thinking my poor granny and grandpa having to, rein these folk in. It was actually quite hilarious to sit and think about all of that. What were family holiday traditions? I know growing up, camping was a huge thing for me. We camped as a family when my kids were young, and my daughter and her husband, they camp as well. They're regular campers, and I know my son will be as well. And I remember saying to my husband after my mom had died. My mom was 65 when she died, and I remember saying to my husband then, I said, when we go, there's nothing left but memories, and so we need to start making some significant ones. And we did. We started then, and every year we took a huge big road trip. And created some fabulous memories for the kids. So my kids, they got quite a range of experience, but at the same time, the common factor in all of that was that we were camping as a family, which actually kind of made it a little less seamless when my husband was in hospice, because when he was in hospice, of course, he had like a big room, and for us, it was just the same as being in a small cabin. We were used to all being in one room. We were used to eating in that room and, spending time there together. And so it really wasn't a big adjustment for the kids in terms of having to share that space. What were family vacations like? Oh, sorry. So that's the end of that. I'm going to then go, I'm going to share the screen differently now and show you some of the books. So this is the one I did on my uncle. So one of the things that I didn't put a slide in there about, but I do want to make comment about, and I've talked about this every time I've talked about, family stories and putting family books together, is I do not put in anything. It's not up to me to reveal the skeletons in the closet. I don't think that's my place. So for instance, I have a great uncle, none of his family are around. And so I'm quite happy to tell his story. He left his wife and children. He emigrated, picked up another wife without divorcing the first one. He ended up being poisoned, and I think the second wife is the one who poisoned him. But so I'm okay to tell that story now because nobody else is going to be directly impacted by that news. Everybody found it fascinating. I'm sure his wife wouldn't have, nor would have the two children that he left behind. So I don't reveal any of that. I mean, I've had people share with me about having been sexually assaulted. I've had people sharing with me about living with an alcoholic. Just there's some really tender moments in there and sensitive moments, and I don't share that. It's just not up to me to do that. Certainly, in terms of keeping that information, I do keep that information. I do document that in my family history software so that it is there for future generations. But in terms of publishing it where other people can see it, I don't. One of the things that I like to do as well is I go through, in addition to sort of gathering all of that information and answering those questions, I also go through for older family members, go into my family history software. I use Magic, and in there I go into the notes and copy the notes and put that onto a Word document. And then from the Word document, I can get my text to tell the story and to make sure that, I'm remembering everything. And you can do that. You don't have to, you can keep it on. If you've got it typed in binders or you've got it written on documents in your computer, then absolutely use that. Just copy and paste for the text and the story to go along with the photographs. So again, this was him when he was younger. He was a scuba diver. My aunt and how they met, their wedding. He was a Santa for us when we were younger. And then we look at your children. Oh. I've got the floating toolbar here and it's a little bit difficult for me to see. Yeah, let's just move this out of the way. Sorry. Oh my goodness, what is that? All right, so the children, again, so the first child, second child, third child, and then, we've done stuff about them spending family time together, my grandmother visiting, other family members. And my aunt, I don't know if I can see this down in here, but she used to do a family every year. I don't think this is it. No, she used to do a Halloween party, family Halloween party every year. So somewhere in here, there's the photographs of the family Halloween party. And this is my uncle's side. So this is his siblings. Time spent with the family again. Their son's wedding. Their grandchildren. Their daughter's wedding. Again, the grandchildren growing up. The family together. And then we had a celebration of life for him, and so I included that as well. So that was in the book as well, and some of the people who were there. And the family used to always have so their place was also the place that a lot of people would go. I think they had a family reunion a couple of times a year, so each side of the family, where they would have like a big bonfire and a big picnic, and people would gather, and so that's documented in there as well. This is my aunt. So for her, there's her with her parents, and that shows as well the family home that she was born in, and her birth certificate, a map of where they were, where the house was, where she worked as a nurse. She was a psychiatric nurse. My uncle, and then their relationship together. This was taken at their engagement. Their marriage certificate. And then I talk about this is I showed you them building the house. This is the receipt for the house, which I think is incredible that she kept that. And then I talk about the fact that people came and stayed with her. I said before, she was the person that everybody kind of came to until they got on their feet. And so, there's photos of the people who spent time with her. And then various occasions where, we were all there at various times. The birth of her son. I love this because there's all pictures of me I had never seen before, which I think is kind of cool. And then their daughter. And then just family time together. And I've done, so there's photos of her with the family. And then in the end, which I thought was really, so that's her with her mother, who she regularly brought over to Canada for a vacation. If I can go down here a little bit. Yeah, that's just us again. They did a lot of cruising. And some of the photos, I mean, she just looks like a movie star in them. They're incredible. So I really, really enjoyed being able to put those in and showcasing that. And then what we did towards the end, if I can find them here, are just important people that she had remained lifelong friends with. Some of these people she'd been friends with for 60, 70 years. And so just honored those friendships in separate pages in the book. I mean, I remember this couple so well, and I was blown away that she had their wedding picture. It was just incredible. Yeah, just the people that she remained friends with for life, really. I remember when I was putting this together, that's her son's wedding. I remember when we were putting this book together, and that's her grandchildren. They were her life, her absolute life. She loved them more, I think, than she loved her children. It was just, she lived and died for those kids, and they for her. it's not just, it wasn't one way. I mean, they just absolutely adored their Nana. Um, and that's her great granddaughter who she got to meet before she passed away. But I wound up being a 99-page book, and I remember saying to my cousin at the time, nobody will have to worry about doing this with me because I have a total of like 2 friends. So we don't need 25 pages in there for other people. And then again, I did a book on my mom. So that's her with her parents, where she lived, the house that they grew up in and that they later lived in, where she worked, again, the same hospital. Her her nursing graduation class. These are her certificates from nursing. Her wedding to my dad. And then story of my dad and his family. And I've got in there his birth registration and baptism as well. Me. Coming to Canada and staying again in that house with my aunt. My mom was quite homesick at one point. Oh, there she is as a nurse. Was quite homesick at one point, and so we went back to Scotland, and I believe there's photos in here somewhere of that as well, but I've passed it by this point because my brother's there. That was the birth of my brother. So again, just a lot of fun being able to put in lots of family memories and sharing those stories. So this is actually the my aunt that did the Halloween party. I was able to include that in this one. So. And then Christmas traditions, because we always, it was, my mom had Christmas breakfast every morning, and my aunt that I did the book on, they lived a block away, so her family always came for breakfast. And then we called my aunt, who lived out about 20 minutes outside the city. And then for dinner, they took turns. So, it was the 3 sisters took turns every year having the Christmas dinner. Once my cousin was old enough and married, she took on that as well. So it was divided between the 4 of them. And then once I was old enough, it was divided again. But we then every Boxing Day, we went back to my aunt's and took all the leftovers. And of course, she made a ton more food. And so we were together for quite a bit over the holiday season. The sisters were together, which then meant that all of us were together. So that is basically it. That's my mom having gone back home. And the other thing I did with my mom's book, because my mom was a storyteller of the family, I included stories. So the stories that we used to sit and listen to when we were younger, whether we wanted to or not, because every time a family member came over, we'd hear the same stories, and we had company from May to September. So this is a story about tomatoes that my grandfather had fooled his neighbor into believing he had farmed. A story about my grandfather getting his eggs boiled in tea because he wouldn't eat white eggs. A care package that my mom had sent home to her mom, her and her brother, just some of the shenanigans that they got up to. That same brother with a cousin and some of the stuff that they got up into, and really just, honoring and remembering those memories and sharing those stories with people. So it was just a lot of fun. So I will stop it at this point, and then I will come back on, and I am going to, let's see here. Oh, sorry. All right, so I am going to actually come back on here on video. There we go. And I'll be happy to do the questions. So the voice, I didn't say any software that I was using. I personally use a scrapbooking program from forever.com. It's called Artisan, and I like it because there's a great deal of flexibility in it. I can change the background paper. I can add embellishments. I can put as much text or as little text as I want. Now, they do have the option of doing sort of pre-designed books that you really just flip pictures into, drop and drag pictures into, and there's very little room for text, and I find that incredibly frustrating. So when I'm doing, if I'm just doing a quick book for somebody, I will do the pre-published book or the pre-designed books, but I prefer myself to do the scrapbooking and to be able to show people, to be able to have that flexibility and design it the way I want. Unfortunately, that software is not on this computer, or I would show you actually how I do it. And for those that were interested, if you want to just send me a quick email saying that you would be interested. I'd be happy to do another webinar just showing you how I use that software. And that's not a problem. And I would do it right now if I was on a different computer. Slide again of the questions to ask. Absolutely. Let's go back in here. And the program that I have, the program that I use for Forever, it also allows, so I can have it printed there as well. So questions to ask for older relatives. Feel free to take a screenshot of this or take a photograph. I did not do a handout. And then you're writing your own story. Let me just see if I can get this. There we go. Oh, sorry. Oops. And then the next one is story of you. And I find that when I sort of structure the story about each person similar, so that the same sort of information is in there. So I have about their childhood, I have about their school, I have about their work, their spouse and stuff. But quite often those questions lead to other discussions when you're talking to people, around personality stuff or who they were closest to, all that kind of stuff. And so I try to include whatever they have shared with me as well. So I use this, but I don't necessarily just stick to that. I will venture a little bit further if that information is provided or if I know it. And yeah, so I think everybody else is just asking what program I use. So it was forever.com, and I can put that in the chat box. And they do have, so it's called Artisan software is the scrapbooking software. And that's the one that has a lot of flexibility in it. And I used to do traditional scrapbooking with, and I was a holdout. I didn't want to do digital at all. But I love digital because I can make as many copies. I mean, for my aunt, I think we ordered 12 copies of it, just so that the children, the grandchildren, and the nieces and nephews had copies, and also so I can make as many as I want. But again, like you pay for the digital art kit, and I can use that as many times as I want. I used to do the old paper ones, and you sometimes have to buy a whole kit of stickers just to get one sticker because you had 200 of all the rest of them. So I prefer this. It's a little bit of money, but I can use it again and again. And I do. I have used it again and again. And so next week I will be presenting on the photo books, the drag and drop photo books, and putting those together because literally they could be put together in a couple of hours. And I've used those for, I tend to really like those for kids. If they just something that's happened, like a special holiday that they've gone on or a sleepover at grandma's, if they were sort of the flower girl at a wedding. So rather than them get the whole wedding album because they don't really understand it, I'll just do them in the wedding. And so I have done those, but I much prefer using the scrapbooking software. And again, for people who are interested, just drop me an email after, and I'm more than happy to do the scrapbooking webinar. What do you do when you don't have photos to go with a story? So I put the story in anyway, and I have been known to, one of I can't share the screen because it's not sort of preloaded, but for one of the first books I did actually, when I started doing digital, remember I said that we used to take the big family road trips, and so I used to journal that and write letters to my family in Scotland just to let them know, which was really kind of funny because my aunt used to keep it in her purse and show it to everybody in the village. They knew more about me than I did. But that journal is what I use to create the book. And so it's mostly text. And then I have just a couple of photos to offset, just sort of say that, just proof that the kids had actually been there and I wasn't just making it up, because that's how my kids are. But, you can put in maps, you can put in screenshots of things, documents. For instance, Sarah, my grandfather's first wife who passed away. So in Sarah's case, it's her marriage certificate, it's her death certificate, it's the birth and death of the baby, because we don't have photographs of that. And so just in research, I did that, but then put the story in to go along with that. And then technology is changing rapidly and goes obsolete so quickly. The method I now use for saving may not be accessible in 20 years. Right, so and forever.com is what I use for storing that kind of stuff as well. Let me just see if I can, I'm not sure if this is going to allow me to do this. And this is my account. And so what I've done here is I store all my photographs in here. So I have them all in albums. And I've then taken these and made them into books. So for instance, let me see if I can find. So this actually, and this is, so my aunt who passed away and that I did the book on, this is films, old family movies that my cousin gave to me, and I had them converted and they're stored here. So for instance, this is probably my 4th birthday party. There's no sound to it, of course, but it's a hoot and a half to look at. And we, one of the things that I like about Forever is there's a number of things. It's private, so you set the privacy. It's guaranteed for your lifetime plus 100 years. So when you pay for the storage, they take the vast majority of that. I think it's like 90% of it or something, and they invest that to be able to maintain this. So it's like buying cloud real estate, right? And they to be able to maintain the hosting for you. If everything that I have uploaded now is in JPEG and it's going to be, some other file format in 5 years, they will do all of that integration for me. I don't have to worry about that. So I don't have to worry. Like once I've got it up here, I don't have to worry about whatever the new technology is. They automatically will migrate that for me. Right now I'm having to send in these old movies. I'm having to send in VHS tapes and whatnot. I don't ever have to do that again. That is all completely done for me. There's 22 films there, and my cousin and I just binge watched them. It was just fabulous. But I wanted to show, so this is a camping one that I did. So I've got the different years in there, and was able to create a book for my kids, all with our camping memories on it and different places that we've gone. Really starting right from, my daughter, I think was, geez, what was she? No, she was a bit older. I think she was probably about 10 months. My son was like 6 weeks the first time we went camping, because he was born earlier in the year than she was. I did this one, which was a lot of fun. This is all of the artwork that the kids ever had. I was able to take that. Let me see if I can bring this up. Yeah, so I had this is my office at our old house, and anything that didn't fit on the fridge got put on here. So, it kind of took over my office space. But I then scanned all of that stuff and made a book for the kids. So it's got all of their artwork in it from, you know, their school years. It's got certificates in it that they got when they were in school. And, you know, it was just, it was a real treasure for them just to be able to have that. So just on Forever, you can purchase the storage. You can get a free account as well. I highly recommend getting the free account first so that you get used to it rather than paying up front. They will digitize for you. So you literally send away for a box, put everything in the box, send it back. They digitize it, they put it in your account, and then they send you all of the originals back so you're not losing anything. And then the create and print, these are the books that we'll do next week. These are the ones that are all pre-designed. And then the digital art is the scrapbooking software that I use. All right, so I think that's all the questions. And then I will see those of you who are interested for next week. Just if, let me see if I can get the link here and put it in the chat. So registration info here. So I'll put this into the chat and you can go ahead and register for this as well. And in which case I will see you next week. And I am going to do one a little bit later on just organizing photos and stuff in there. So I can give you that link next week. It's not a Canadian company, Linda. It's based in the US. Yeah, they're out of Philadelphia, actually. Okay, everyone, thank you so much. And I will see you again next week for those who are interested. And for not, happy scrapping. Good luck putting your book together. If at any point you're stuck, you have questions, please feel free to email me. I'm more than happy to assist you. And I'm also very happy to put the book together for you if that's something that would be easier for you. I would just get the information and the photos from you and create the book and then send you the draft. Certainly have done enough of those. So it doesn't have to be daunting, but it can be very rewarding, and it certainly becomes an heirloom treasure.